We all love talking about watches with like-minded collectors, but there's sometimes situations where talking watches is the last thing you want to do. Here's a few of them. Picture the scene. You've been dreading this work conference for weeks. 2 full days listening to so-called experts drone on about the nuances of stationery sales. Exciting stuff, right? Just when you're mentally preparing yourself for the longest weekend of your life, you arrive and spot a familiar face in the crowd. Julie, an old colleague, an old flame. Suddenly, this weekend has a spark of potential. You spend the breaks between the mind-numbing seminars catching up with Julie, who, to your surprise, seems just as thrilled to see you. The conversation flows, the banter is sharp, and it feels like no time has passed at all. Things are going great. Until the social gathering that evening. As you're laughing with Julie, another man swoops in and strikes up a conversation with her. Sensing a potential threat to your rekindling romance, you jump in, eager to make your presence known. "Nice to meet you, I'm Dave," he says with a grin. Dave seems harmless enough. A bit too eager, perhaps, but harmless. Julie, in a moment of misguided enthusiasm, remembers that you're a watch guy and, in a dazzling display of matchmaking prowess, mentions that Dave is too. Oh, joy! You smile and nod, thinking, have we just become best friends? So, what's in your collection? You ask, making polite conversation. Dave's eyes light up as he rattles his prized possessions, a gigantic 55mm diesel chronograph, a Daniel Wellington, a Filippo Loretti, and, according to Dave, a rare gem. A gaudy brass watch with a Chinese dragon embossed into the dial that you've seen 1,000 times on AliExpress and ignored every time. Then comes the question that you've been dreading since Dave opened his mouth. What do you think? You glance at Julie, who's positively beaming. Convinced she's orchestrated a bonding moment for the ages. Inside, you feel like you've just been handed a live grenade. How could she do this to me? Suddenly, that flame that you thought had rekindled has well and truly been put out with an industrial-sized fire extinguisher. You scramble for a response. It's been a while since you were asked the question, and it's become intense. Very interesting collection, buddy. Dave smiles with pride. Thanks. Crisis averted, or so you think. But Dave, emboldened by your apparent approval, decides that watches are now the topic of the night. You're trapped. You've just told this man his monstrous 55mm diesel is interesting. And now you're in it for the long haul. Julie, misleading the room completely, gives you a thumbs up and leaves you to it. Thanks, Julie, you say, plastering a smile on your face. Thanks for nothing, you whisper under your breath. Hours pass and you find yourself nodding along to Dave's lecture on how Vincera's direct-to-consumer model is revolutionising the luxury watch market. Your exit plan finally kicks in. It's getting late. We have an early start, you say, stifling a yawn. Great night, but I'm going to have to hit the sack. Dave agrees, and you both exchange goodnights. Freedom at last. The next morning, you stumble into the breakfast line, bleary-eyed but relieved that the night is over. As you reach for some coffee, you feel a tap on your shoulder. It's Dave, proudly sporting his Daniel Wellington. He flashes you a grin, ready to pick up right where you left off. We all love a bargain, don't we? There's nothing quite like the feeling of knowing you've bested a watch dealer, driven a hard sale, and walked away with a piece that you've been coveting at a price that's almost too good to be true. It's the thrill of the chase, the satisfaction of getting more for less, that makes the whole experience feel like a minor triumph. Or think about those end-of-season sales. You know, when the watch you've been eyeing for ages suddenly drops into your price range, as if by magic. It's the sort of moment that makes your heart skip a beat as you reach for your wallet. And let's not forget the pre-owned market, where, with a bit of patience and luck, you can find a gem at a fraction of its original cost. Well done, you've just scored yourself a win. And if you don't love a bargain, then do drop me your address. I'll send someone round to check on you. Clearly, something's amiss. Now, A good deal is always a cause for celebration in our little horological world. But there are collectors out there who take bargain hunting to an entirely different level. These are the folk who seem to prioritise value for money above all else. It doesn't matter if the watch is something they've actually desired or not. If the price is right, they'll have it. Picture this. A bloke with wrists like twigs, strapping a 50mm U-boat Classico. The thing is practically the size of a dinner plate. But it was going for a song, so naturally he couldn't resist. It's less about the watch and more about the deal. If you ever find yourself in conversation with someone who kicks off with, "Yes, and it only cost me," or start plotting your exit strategy. Quickly, before you're trapped in an endless saga of bargains, discounts and deals that might make you want to long for the sweet release of a full price purchase. Consider yourself warned. You find yourself at a child's birthday party. The school friend of a 5-year-old that lives in the posh end of town. Feeling awkward, surrounded by parents that you never knew existed 10 minutes ago, you busy yourself pretending the mini quiches and chicken drumsticks are the most fascinating thing in the room and require your full attention. But that's when you notice him, the father of the birthday boy, the Rolex guy. You could spot him a mile away, immaculately dressed, with a wrist weighed down by the kind of Rolex that probably cost more than your last 3 cars combined. Of course, fate being the cruel prankster that it is, you end up cornered by him in conversation. "Nice watch," you say, because what else are you supposed to say? Compliment the expensive accessory and hope to God he doesn't start reciting his investment strategies. "Ah, thank you," he says, raising his wrist ever so slightly so you can fully admire the gleam. "It's a Rolex Submariner, quite rare, you know." "Oh, is it?" you reply, mustering the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for hearing about a stranger's stamp collection. "I suppose they're not something you see every day. Though, funny enough, I've seen 3 already today." He either misses your point or chooses to ignore it. "Yes, well, this particular model is especially sought after," he says, puffing his chest out like a peacock in heat. "I only wear Rolex, actually. It's the only brand worth considering." "Only Rolex?" you echo, arching an eyebrow. "No space in the collection for, say, an Omega or a Patek? Nothing, too flashy?" He gives you a look so drenched in condescension, you half expect him to offer you a handkerchief to dry off. Once you've reached the level of Rolex, there's no point in looking elsewhere. "Ah, right," you say, nodding slowly, like deciding a BMW is the pinnacle of automotive engineering and ignoring everything else that might have more, shall we say, finesse. He smiles indulgently, clearly pleased with your understanding. "Exactly. Why settle for less than the best?" "Indeed," you murmur, stifling the urge to roll your eyes. "So how many of these best-in-class timepieces do you own?" 25. All Rolex, naturally. There's the blue Submariner, the black one, the green one, the Batman, the Batgirl, a Yachtmaster for the weekends, a Daytona for when I'm feeling sporty. "Amazing," you interject, sensing that this list might go on for longer than your will to live. You must be very proud. Glancing down at your own wrist, you know you really shouldn't say it. This man has no interest in you, but the urge is too strong. "Well, I suppose I can't compete with that. I'm currently wearing my Casio. It's digital, precision timing that no Rolex can beat." There's a pause, a long, uncomfortable pause. The kind where you can practically hear someone's internal monologue screaming, "Dear God, why am I talking to this peasant?" "Casio," he repeats, his face twisting into something that's supposed to resemble a polite smile, but ends up looking like he's just stepped in something that exited a dog's rear end. "Interesting choice." "Oh, absolutely," you say, leaning fully into the awkwardness now. "I nearly went for the one with the calculator, but in the end, the sleek plastic strap on this one really spoke to my tried my best and that's all that matters vibe." He forces a laugh, the kind that's as hollow as his conversational skills. "Well, each to their own, I suppose. But anyway, my Daytona, you're trapped. There's no escape in sight. Your only hope is to keep shoveling the chicken drumsticks into your mouth and pray that one of them never reached the correct temperature before it was removed from the oven. After all, A long stint in A&E would be infinitely more enjoyable than hearing him begin to list his Datejust collection. You've never rooted for bad catering so hard in your life. I'm sure you'll agree, if we could buy every watch that takes our fancy, we'd be on cloud 9. Imagine it, you fancy a Breitling Navitimer? Done. But wait, what's that? A Zenith Defy El Primero winking at you from the corner of the room? Go on then, add it to the basket too. Of course, it's all a bit of a fantasy, but indulge me for a moment. The real joy in this hobby isn't simply acquiring the latest timepieces at the drop of a hat. No, it's the thrill of the chase, the anticipation, the sweat and tears of securing that next coveted piece. If every watch was just a click away, where's the fun in that? But fear not, for there is a fantasy that even us mere mortals can participate in. Enter the Homage watch. Now, don't get me wrong, a decent Homage has a place in this hobby of ours, and personally, I see nothing wrong with collecting them. I've had plenty myself, and I'm sure lots of you have too. That said, the compulsive Homage collector is not like you or I. They are a different breed altogether. You see, they aren't interested in great value original pieces, they just want things that look like expensive pieces. Not to fool, no, they're not fake. They just like proving a point, whatever that may be. You've met one, I'm sure. Remember the day you finally got your hands on that elusive watch? The one that took months of saving, negotiated, and maybe a few sleepless nights? That feeling of glee and satisfaction you had proudly wearing it as you strolled out of the dealer's door. You get home and post a photo of your new piece on Facebook. And the first reply? Of course, it has to be the compulsive Homage collector, eager to rain on your parade with a picture of his Homage. A watch that looks almost identical to yours, but cost a mere pittance. He's quick to point out that you've basically bought the same watch, but he was smart enough to save a fortune. Branded watches? Pfft. What a waste of money, apparently. But not this time. You're ready. You counter with a reasoned argument. A watch's value isn't just in the metal on your wrist. There's research, design, marketing, and the allure of the brand itself. And of course, brand ambassadors to pay for. Things Homage brands conveniently sidestep. You proudly type this out, certain you've made a point. Damn it, he's done it again. You've become that guy. While everyone else on your friends list watches the exchange with a mix of amusement and pity. And the worst thing? He's probably right about everything, even though he's taking all of the joy out of the hobby. Best to just avoid him. Picture the scene. You're soaking up the sun on your summer holiday in LA. Feeling adventurous, you decide to take a day trip to Beverly Hills. Hoping to spot a few Z-listers to pad out your autograph collection. As you stroll down Hollywood Boulevard, phone in hand, you're recording everything like a wannabe paparazzi. Because, who knows, you might just catch Eddie Murphy or Simon Cowell picking up a cabbage for their supper. But you're so engrossed in your impromptu documentary that you plough straight into someone. You look up and find yourself face to face with a man wearing a baseball cap, an awkwardly tight sports t-shirt, and joggers that leave little to the imagination. Your gaze drifts down to his questionably toned wrist. How does anyone get muscles there without the help of some shady supplements, you think? But then, you spot it. A Richard Mille. After a quick apology for your lack of spatial awareness, you blurt out, "Wow, that watch is something else." The man, let's call him Anthony, smiles and says thanks, and without skipping a beat, adds, "Yes, I'm an expert in luxury watches, don't you know?" You didn't ask, but whatever. Before you can make your escape, Anthony's off and running. Name a luxury watch, and I'll give you every last detail you need to know about it. You think, it's okay mate, I was just being polite. But there's no stopping him. A Rolex Hulk? Retail price $9,050. Current market price $17,850. An AP Royal Oak Oyster Perpetual Calendar in white ceramic? Retail price $110,000. Current market value $258,000. You have to think fast. This bloke is like a robot stuck in a loop. You quickly interject. What do you think of the direction Oris are heading in? Anthony hesitates. Oris? Yeah, I've heard of them, I think. You're beginning to notice a problem. You test your findings like any good problem solver with a new question. Or how about the movement in the JLC Classic Large Duo face? What are your thoughts on that? He splutters. Retail price $23,300. Current market value $15,950. Those things are junk. It's at this point you notice Anthony's been rubbing his nose and nervously glancing around the street the entire time. You hear a voice from 40 yards behind you scream something like, FD Pie, put your hands up. You spin around thinking, perfect, an excuse to exit this bizarre encounter. But as luck would have it, you turn back to Anthony, and just like that, he had vanished. Phew. You wander into your local pub one evening. It's the kind of place where the carpets are older than most of the patrons, and the smell of stale beer hangs in the air like a well-worn jacket. You're halfway through your pint, minding your own business, when you notice him. Sitting at the bar, he's the kind of bloke that looks like he stepped straight out of a bad gangster movie. Slick back hair, an oversized leather jacket, and a watch that was trying a bit too hard to be noticed. Naturally, it's impossible to miss. This thing was practically blinding you from across the room. You make the mistake of glancing for too long, which the geezer, of course, takes as an invitation to share his wisdom. Like the watch, do you? He sneers, leaning over in a way that makes you instantly regret ever making eye contact. It's a Rolex, mate. Not just anyone can get their hands on one of these. You raise an eyebrow, but before you can get a word in, he continues. Yeah, they don't just sell these to anyone, he boasts, tapping the watch as if it were made of pure gold. You've got to have connections, know what I mean? Can't just walk into a dealer's and pick one of these up like a tin of beans. You glance down at your own watch, but he caught a sight of it before you could cover it up. Oh, what's that you got there? He snorted, his nose wrinkling as if he just caught a whiff of something unpleasant. A Seiko? Blimey, a bit cheap, isn't it? But I suppose it's good enough if you're not too bothered about making an impression. He leans in closer, clearly enjoying himself far too much. See, that's where you and I differ, mate. You're wearing a watch, I'm wearing a lifestyle. This, he said, giving his Rolex an affectionate pat, isn't just about telling the time. It's about telling the world I've arrived. You spotted something off with this distinguished gentleman's watch. You don't want to offend, but maybe he doesn't know. Maybe he's been scammed. You open your mouth, but he's already off again. Bet you've never even held a watch like this, have you? They're not easy to come by. You've got to know the right people, have the right kind of money. This is the real deal. He finally pauses, waiting for some sort of response, but you just raise your pint to your lips, letting the silence stretch. He chuckles, clearly mistaking your silence for awe. No need to be shy, mate. Not everyone's cut out for this lifestyle. But don't worry, one day you might work your way up. Might even be able to swap that Seiko for something with a bit more class. He gives you a patronising pat on the shoulder, then saunters off, probably to find his next ear victim. You watch him wander off, shaking your head in disbelief. After all, when someone's that deep in their own fantasy, there's really no need to burst their bubble. This one should be quick. He's a bit of a disaster, really. Career, non-existent. Friends, even fewer. He's the human equivalent of an unforced error. The kind of bloke that could clear a room just by walking into it. Disorganised, out of touch, and somehow always managing to say the wrong thing at the worst possible time. Women avoid him like the plague, and you can practically hear the chuckles the moment he leaves the room. Or so I've heard. Please like and subscribe.